the death of a cheerleader? It's June 1984 in Orinda, California. Orinda was known for its wealth and good schools. The school produced good athletes and smart kids that went off to go on to Ivy League colleges. It was around 10 p.m. when a couple who was hosting a get-together got a knock at the door. It was 16-year-old Kirsten Costas, a pretty short girl with dark curly hair. She tells the homeowner that she needs a ride home because the friend that she was with just went weird. She asked if she could use the phone to call home and see if she could get a ride home. The homeowner had no problem and let her use the phone and welcomed her in. She tried to call home and there was no answer. Her family was actually out. They were at an event for her little brother for his football or something like that. I think it was a banquet. The homeowner said that Kirsten did seem upset, but not scared or anything like that. He asked her if she was going to be okay and offered her a ride home. She did accept the ride home. The homeowner's wife looked out as Kirsten and her husband were leaving. She noticed that there was a Pinto sitting in the driveway with a young female inside. She noticed that when they pulled away to drive Kirsten home, that the Pinto followed and drove away pretty fast to catch up with them. Well, when the homeowner took Kirsten home, she went up and knocked at her door and the lights were out and her family wasn't home. The homeowner asked if she was going to be okay, and she said yes, she's just going to go right over to the neighbor's house, and that's where she headed. As she went over to the neighbor's house, the homeowner that drove her home noticed that a female got out of a car and followed and raced past the car that he was sitting in. He got a quick glimpse of her, but it was so dark he couldn't really see what was happening. He heard some talking and then some yelling, and he thought they were fist fighting. He said it was so hard to see because it was dark, but he seen some moving around and he seen Kirsten go to the ground. That's whenever he got out of his car and went over to see if she was okay, but he noticed that person in a Pinto raced past him, got back in her car, and he wanted to see what was going on with her. He thought it was suspicious, so he got back in his car and followed her. He eventually lost her though. She sped off and he doesn't know where she went. While all this is going on, the neighbor whose house Kirsten was knocking at heard loud screams. That's when he came outside and found Kirsten. She was standing, but barely. She was covered in blood, and she said, help me, I've been..." And then she collapsed to the ground. The neighbor tried to help her, but she was losing so much blood so quickly, so he had to go run home to call 911. And as the paramedics arrive, so do Kirsten's parents. They are pulling up, and all they see is flashing lights and chaos, and they have no idea what's going on. They were so confused and so concerned. Couldn't imagine what was going through their heads at that moment. Just terrible. And then they seen their daughter covered in blood. Kirsten ended up passing away on the way to the hospital. She lost too much blood. Just 1 month shy of her 16th birthday. She was still a baby. And so was her Bernardette Protti, who was also 16 years old. Bernadette's Kirsten like a butcher, over and over and over again with a knife from the kitchen. And then, after she to death, she got in her car, drove home, took the knife back into the kitchen, washed it before placing it back in her cupboard, and then went for a walk with her mom and walked the dog in the park like nothing had happened. Why did this happen? Kirsten was the popular girl at school. She was bubbly, she was pretty, she was head cheerleader. She was everything Bernadette wanted to be, but couldn't be. She had good grades. She was known by everybody as the girl that could do anything and everything. She was good at everything. And mostly everybody had nothing but good things to say about her. Her teachers loved her, the school loved her, the students loved her, everybody loved her. Bernadette didn't like her. Kirsten's parents had money, and Kirsten had anything that she could ever want and more. Bernadette, on the other hand, her family, they were just middle class average. That affected Bernadette. Going to a school like she went to where status was everything, living in Orinda, California where wealth is a status symbol, the culture of that place is just, if you have money, you're important, and if you don't, you're nothing. A lot of people can be okay with being nothing and average, but Bernadette wanted more. She wanted what Kirsten had. It was what she obsessed over. Friends of Bernadette stated that that's all she would ever talk about. She had some kind of weird obsession with Kirsten. Some people state that she may have had a crush on Kirsten, and that was talked about in her trial, not proven. Personally, I think it was a little bit of an obsession. I think that Bernadette wanted to be Kirsten. Both girls were a member of a elite club in the school called the Bobolinks. They would volunteer, go to hospitals, volunteer at events, help the less fortunate. This was an invite-only thing. I think that Bernadette would have been content and happy that she was invited to be a part of this program, but apparently that wasn't enough for her. She wanted to be a cheerleader, she wanted to be in the drama club, she wanted to be a journalist and part of the yearbook staff. That year, she didn't get any of that. The only thing that she did get was an invite to the Bobolinks. Tried out for cheerleader and she didn't make it. Kirsten did. The school yearbook is another thing that she really had her heart set on and she didn't get it. This was all crushing for her. She really wanted to be Kirsten's friend because in Bernadette's mind, she thought that if she could be Kirsten's friend, that maybe she could have Kirsten's popularity. You know how teenagers think. Kirsten didn't like Bernadette. According to Bernadette, she bullied her, but there was never any evidence of that, and friends of both Bernadette and Kirsten have spoken out. They claim that there was no bullying, that she might have been a little cocky here and there and a little arrogant at times, but she didn't bully her. There was an instance that Bernadette spoke out when they went skiing that Bernadette had to use hand-me-down skis and equipment because her family just couldn't afford to buy new. Kirsten bullied her, and Bernadette was already self-conscious about it to begin with. Maybe if she was bullied about her ski equipment from Kirsten, that could have been what pushed her over the edge. Another thing that I think pushed her over the edge was when she wasn't chosen to be a cheerleader, and Kirsten was. Bernadette's friend spoke out and said, I think it was during the trial, that she was crushed over this, and she worked so hard to become a cheerleader. She practiced every day. Her friend was even surprised that she wasn't chosen to be a cheerleader. Kirsten was not only the cheerleader, but the head cheerleader. I think she was just envious of Kirsten. Go back to the night of the make it. Kirsten did. The school yearbook is another thing that she really had her heart set on and she didn't get it. This was all crushing for her. She really wanted to be Kirsten's friend because in Bernadette's mind, she thought that if she could be Kirsten's friend, that maybe she could have Kirsten's popularity. You know how teenagers think. Kirsten didn't like Bernadette. According to Bernadette, she bullied her, but there was never any evidence of that, and friends of both Bernadette and Kirsten have spoken out. They claim that there was no bullying, that she might have been a little cocky here and there and a little arrogant at times, but she didn't bully her. There was an instance that Bernadette spoke out when they went skiing that Bernadette had to use hand-me-down skis and equipment because her family just couldn't afford to buy new. Kirsten bullied her, and Bernadette was already self-conscious about it to begin with. Maybe if she was bullied about her ski equipment from Kirsten, that could have been what pushed her over the edge. Another thing that I think pushed her over the edge was when she wasn't chosen to be a cheerleader, and Kirsten was. Bernadette's friend spoke out and said, I think it was during the trial, that she was crushed over this, and she worked so hard to become a cheerleader. She practiced every day. Her friend was even surprised that she wasn't chosen to be a cheerleader. Kirsten was not only the cheerleader, but the head cheerleader. I think she was just envious of Kirsten. Go back to the night of the about a week before the murder, Kirsten's mother got an anonymous phone call. Kirsten wasn't home at the time. She was actually at cheerleading camp. Bernadette knew this, and it was Bernadette on the call. She didn't tell Kirsten's mother who she was, and she asked her more than once during this call not to tell Kirsten about the call. Said it was supposed to be a surprise. She claimed that she was from the Bobolinks, that they were having a secret dinner, and she wanted Kirsten to be dressed up and ready to go, and to keep it a secret. So her mother did keep it a secret. The day of the dinner, Kirsten's family had planned, like I said earlier, to go to the banquet for Kirsten's brother's football. They were going to be gone. She told her about the call and said, we'll be ready because they're going to pick you up here and you don't have to worry, just dress casual and they'll pick you up. When the time came, and I think it was 7 p.m., Bernadette pulled up in her parents' Pinto. She didn't have a license for. And how she got the Pinto was she lied to her parents and said she was babysitting, but she wasn't really babysitting. But she asked her dad to take her there, asked if her dad could leave the car there because it would help make her feel safer and maybe people wouldn't think that she was alone if they seen the car outside. So he agreed and he walked home and left her with the car. As soon as he left, she got in the car and went over to pick Kirsten up. Kirsten, you know, like I said earlier, didn't like Bernadette, but got into the car anyways, probably thinking, well, maybe there really is a Bobolinks special dinner. Well, anyways, they got into the car. She looks over. sees Bernadette wearing sweats. She's like, I thought you said there was a party. Bernadette says, well, I'm gonna spill the beans. There is a party, but we're not gonna go to the party. Bernadette says, well, I thought we could just, get to know each other. Maybe if we get to know each other, well, maybe you'll want to be friends with me. And she says, well, this is a little weird, so let me pull over. And this is all according to Bernadette. We don't know if this is verified. Kirsten's family is so against this, they claim that she wouldn't do this. But however, Bernadette stated this more than once, so who knows what really happened. But they pulled into the church parking lot. Supposedly, Bernadette says that Kirsten wanted to get high, smoke up before going to the party. Now, some people have stated that there was no party. I did verify there was a party, but we don't know if they were planning on going to the party or not, because it is weird that she was wearing sweats. So I don't know if they were really planning on going to the party, but Bernadette did state that she thought that if her and Kirsten could get to know each other, that Kirsten would want to become friends with her. They did go to the church parking lot, and that's when things got weird. Apparently, according to Bernadette, Kirsten wanted her to smoke with her. She didn't want to. She declined. Supposedly, Kirsten made fun of her and said, well, I'm going to go back to school and tell everybody you're a big weirdo and blah, blah, blah. She got out of the car, and that's whenever she walked up to the neighbors and asked if she could use their phone and get a ride home. Kirsten's no longer here, so we can't get her side of the story. But my theory is possibly that maybe Bernadette did like women, and maybe she was more than envious of Kirsten. Maybe she really did like Kirsten. Maybe she tried to make a pass at Kirsten in a car, and maybe Kirsten wasn't into that at all and said, ew, and I'm gonna tell everybody your secret. And if you think about it, back then, being gay was considered like bad. It's not like it is today. Something like that could be terrifying for a teenager to go through. Nobody knows, but Bernadette and the girl that's no longer with us. It's a terrible story. Now, months went by, and they still had no idea who Kirsten's killer was. People were getting afraid. Young women were afraid to go outside. They weren't sure what was going on. Kirsten's family was getting fed up. They wanted to know who the killer was as well. Like I said earlier, they had money. They could afford a private detective, and they hired one. And that detective was able to get a profile of the killer made up, and it took a couple months to get that completed. The profile of the killer was identical to Bernadette. So much so that she even said it herself. Before that happened, for months, there was a girl that was friends with Kirsten and Bernadette. Well, she used to be friends with Kirsten when they were younger. And then whenever they started going to middle school and high school, she changed and she became alternative. Kirsten was considered, back then preppy. This girl no longer wanted to be associated with preppy. She wanted to be alternative. She wanted to have her own style because she was so unique and different. And especially back then in the damn 80s and 90s, she was considered, weird. So she was their only suspect. Just because of that reason, they were hassling her. People at school were bullying her. People in the town were bullying her and her family. And it got so bad that her mother took her out of school, moved her to a different school, and I think they moved completely to a different town because of how bad it got. And this poor innocent girl did nothing. But in the meantime, while all of this was going on, the detectives that Kirsten's family had hired got a workup and a profile of what they believed the killer to be. Once the police got a hold of this, they started to look more into Bernadette. And they realized, well, Bernadette's family does have a Pinto. We had 2 witnesses that seen a Pinto. I don't know what took them so long to question her, but it took them a long time to question her for whatever reason. Because she portrayed the girl that, would never do this. Everybody just looked past her and focused more on the alternative girl. That's how society is. So they brought her in for questioning. And they brought up the profile of the killer. And they let her look over and they let her read it. She looked at it. She read it. She said, oh my God, that sounds just like me. And they said, yeah. That's what we thought too. They really started to put the pressure on her. And she was already feeling pressure. I mean, things were going well for her. I mean, she was dating now. She is now secretary of the Bobolinks. She's feeling important. People are paying more attention to her. She's starting to come out of her shell. But she's dealing with the guilt of killing Kirsten. It's eating her up. She can no longer take it. She tells her mom, hey, I need to talk to you. Her mom was busy at the time. I think it was around Christmas time. Her mom was busy, cleaning and taking care of the house, dealing with Christmas. She said, well, can I just take a nap and we'll talk after the nap? Her nap ended up turning into like an 8-hour sleep. The next day, Bernadette wrote her mom a note and said, hey, I'm going to school. Don't open this and read it for an hour. And her mother abided by that. Her mom was really religious. Their whole family was avid churchgoers, and her mom went to Bible study and did all that. So her mom decided to read her Bible and set her clock for an hour. And then once the timer went off, she decided to open the note. And by that time, Bernardette was already at school. She read the note, which was a confession. She called up the school immediately. She called her husband, had him come home from work. She went to the school, picked up Bernardette. She, originally planned on taking Bernardette to turn herself in. Said she wanted just one last time with her daughter. She did. And I don't even think they talked. They just sat there. After that, she took Bernardette to the police station, and that's when Bernardette made a full confession. Bernardette was sentenced to 9 years in prison. She completed 7 years, and then she was released on parole. I don't know if you've watched the movie Death of a Cheerleader. That's the story about the death of a cheerleader. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
My mother used to say, "You be nice to the less fortunate." And in the case of Kristen Costas, maybe that advice should have been said to her. This is the case of Bernardette Protti, aka the cheerleader murder. Viewer discretion is advised. Kristen Costas was born on July 23, 1968 in Oakland, California, to her parents Arthur and Barrett Costas. She was the oldest child and had a younger brother. Her parents were very affluent in the small town of Orinda, California. They lived in a very nice home, and Kristen was on the volleyball swim team, and she was a very popular cheerleader at the local high school. Bernardette Protti was born on September 20th, 1968, and she was the girl from the opposite side of the tracks. She did not know her father, and it was just her mother, and her sister, who lived in a very small house in Orinda, California. Once Bernardette made it to high school, she was no more popular there than she was at home. For you see, Bernardette was looked at as weird, awkward, and somewhat of a dork. Bernardette thought if she became a cheerleader that her hopes in her life would change. She also thought befriending Kristen, the most popular cheerleader and most popular girl in school, would also boost her confidence and make others around her like her. According to sources, Bernardette would try for many months to get Kristen Costas to become her friend, or at least to even acknowledge her so that the other kids in the school can stop bullying her. According to whoever you ask, Kristen could have been the sweet, fun-loving, popular cheerleader that was very nice to everyone. Or, according to Bernardette and some of her friends, Kristen was the mean-spirited, popular girl that always treated Bernardette as if she was a nuisance or some type of bug that needed to be squashed. Bernardette's last-ditch attempt to have a normal high school life was ended when she was rejected from the cheerleading team. The spot was instead given to Kristen. According to sources and according to police, that may have been what sent Bernardette over the edge. This is part 2 to the cheerleader murder, aka the case of Bernardette Protti. Viewer discretion is advised. So on June 23, 1984, Kristen Costas would be lured out of her home by Bernardette Protti under the assumption that she had been invited to a party. However, when Kristen arrived, she realized that she was indeed not invited to the party and that it was all a ruse for Bernardette to once again pressure Kristen into becoming her friend. The two girls would argue and quarrel inside of Bernadette's car. Kristen Costas would break free and run to the home of a nearby neighbor and tell them that her friend had gone all weird on her and that she needed a ride home. The neighbors would drive Kristen back to her home and park across the street. They did this because Bernardette was following very closely behind them in her own vehicle. What transpired next was shocking. Bernardette Protti would exit her vehicle. She would approach Kristen, who was on her front steps, unlocking her door to go inside. The two girls were seen arguing, and what started out as a fist fight led to something more sinister. The neighbors that had driven Kristen home feared for her because she was very scared when she approached them, so they parked across the street after dropping her off. And what they saw, according to police, they said they thought it was a fist fight until they noticed blood leaking from Kristen and Kristen trying to crawl away from Bernardette. They would exit their vehicles, where they would find Kristen was brutally stabbed in the front yard of her own home. Bernardette would leave, dispose of evidence, and then, for the next 6 months, go on with her life. When police arrived, they seen that Kristen Costas had been brutally attacked on the front lawn of her home, pictured here. Although there were 2 witnesses who gave an accurate description, police did not know who could have done this to Kristen. Her own parents said that it was a friend of hers who had told her to come out of the house, but they didn't know the name of the friend. The next day, police would investigate the entire school, looking at any and everyone who might have had an issue, grudge, or problem with Kristen. No one knew of anybody that would want to harm her. However, her friends did point police in the direction of Bernardette Protti. However, when Bernardette was questioned, Bernardette claimed that Kristen and her were not friends and that Kristen didn't like her very much. She also claimed that her and Kristen never talked and that she never tried to lure Kristen out of her home. She claimed that she didn't even know where Kristen lived. However, police would soon realize that they had let their killer almost slip away. This is part 3 to the cheerleader murder, aka the case of Bernardette Protti. Viewer discretion is advised. So for a while, Kristen's killer remained unknown. That is, until someone from the Protti family alerted police. That person was Bernadette's own sister. Her sister had came to the police station or called the police. Accounts vary. The point being, she went to police. She told them a story. And the story she told was something very chilling. She told of a story that her sister, Bernardette, had came home the night that Kristen was murdered. Her clothes were bloody, and asked her sister to dispose of both her bloody clothes and the kitchen knife. Her sister did as she was told. Bernardette never explained to her sister why she had blood on her clothes or why she needed to get rid of these things. Bernardette would then go on for the next 6 months of her life, not telling anyone of the gruesome act that she had committed. While Bernardette may have thought that she got away with the perfect crime, she was wrong. Due to her sister outing her, that gave police all the evidence that they needed to issue a warrant for her arrest. Bernardette would turn herself in on December 10, 1984. Her trial was a media circus because no one could understand how a 17-year-old child could murder their own classmate. However, prosecution brought on numerous witnesses and countless pieces of evidence that showed that Bernardette did not want to be Kristen's friend. She wanted Kristen's life. She wanted to be liked and loved, and she wanted everybody to flock to her. However, Bernardette, according to prosecution, was looked at as the oddball, the weird girl, the dork, the nerd, if you may. And Bernardette just couldn't stand that Kristen was getting all of the love, attention, and affection that Bernardette had yearned for. She even wanted to be in Kristen's air quote rich clique of friends. She wanted to live in the neighborhood that Kristen lived in. She wanted to be Kristen through and through. And when she realized that she couldn't have Kristen both as a friend or live her life, she resorted to violence. According to prosecution, she stabbed Kristen anywhere from 4 to 8 times in her back, chest, and abdomen. She then left Kristen dying on her front lawn and drove away as if nothing ever happened. Bernardette was found guilty and sentenced to 9 years in prison. She was released after serving 7. This is the finale and the movie reveal to the cheerleader murder, aka the case of Bernardette Protti. Viewer discretion is advised. So after Kristen's murder, Bernadette's trial and conviction, the Costas family moved to Hawaii. Their current whereabouts in Hawaii is unknown. The Protti family has never been publicly seen since the murders, and Bernardette was released at the age of 23 or 25, accounts vary, and she now lives under a new identity. Bernardette Protti now lives under the identity of Jeanette Tamanka. She is currently married and has children of her own. Her current whereabouts are unknown, and she has never made any statements publicly or issued an apology to the Costas family for what she did. A Friend to Die For, aka Death of a Cheerleader, is the Lifetime movie detailing the Kristen Costas and Bernardette Protti case. Although their names were changed and some details and reputations were added, fictionalized, and sensationalized, the plot is still the same. Was Bernardette Protti a simple girl who just wanted to befriend the most popular girl in school so that she can have a normal existence? Or is Bernardette Protti what some children may be? They strive for excellence. They want something so badly that they'll do anything to get it, including murder. Death of a Cheerleader is available on Tubi TV. You can buy it on Amazon Prime, Google Play Movies, and other streaming services.
On the 21st of June in 1984, Bernardette phoned Kirsten's home. Kirsten's mother answered the phone, and without disclosing who she was, Bernardette informed her mother that Kirsten was invited to a Bobo Lynx initiation dinner, which would take place that Saturday. She just told Kirsten's mom that they would pick her up from her home and that she should just be ready and waiting for them. But in reality, there really was no dinner. That Saturday, on the 23rd of June 1984, Bernardette lied to her parents and told them she had to babysit kids in the neighborhood. Her dad went and dropped her off at the home where she was supposed to babysit, and he drove off without watching her go inside. Once he drove off, Bernardette walked back to her home and then got into her family's yellow Ford Pinto and drove to Kirsten's home to pick her up.
This week at Murder in 20 podcast, the episode of Kirsten Costas, and here's a short segment. In 1984, Bernardette Protti was 15 and a sophomore attending grade 10 at Miramonte High School, a pretty blonde with a circle of friends. Even though she studied hard, she never felt she was good enough and strived to have people like her. Bernardette worked so hard at everything. She wanted to be a cheerleader and tried out for the squad. Afterwards, she told a friend she couldn't believe she didn't make it. Bernardette was a member of the swim team, but wasn't picked to be on the school's varsity team. She also tried out for the yearbook club, but wasn't selected. Kirsten Costas also attended Miramonte High School as a sophomore. She too was pretty with dark curly hair. Her outgoing personality was a joy for others to be around, and she naturally attracted many friends and was very popular. Kirsten naturally excelled at everything she tried. She was an all-around athlete who swam, skied, played soccer, was a gymnast, loved the ballet, and was a great dancer. On the swim team, she was selected for the school's varsity team. She belonged to the yearbook club and was selected to be a cheerleader. Bernardette didn't see herself as popular enough. She brushed aside her good looks and high marks and dwelled on her failures. Kirsten became a symbol for everything that went wrong in Bernardette's life. If you're dying to hear the full episode, it's free. In our profile, tap our Instagram or YouTube link, or visit murderin20.com, or check us out on all major podcast platforms. Be sure to like, share, and follow us to learn about upcoming episodes every Wednesday. We'd like to acknowledge Purple Planet for use of their music and our many editorial sources who are listed on our website. Murder in 20 episodes are concise and complete in 20 minutes. Less talk and more true crime.